Hello, my friends. I hope you're having a fantastic week so far. This week, I wanted to give you the opportunity to listen in on an exciting interview I did with Oscar from V88 App Development. Now, they do a no-code solution to apps, and we talked about AI, we talked about apps, of course, and also we talked about the landscape of social media and how it's either pro or con for your mental health and also society as a whole. So thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me once again. If you took value from this episode, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in just a moment.
Hey, I'm Oscar, founder of V88. We're a no-code agency based down in Poole, Bournemouth in the UK. We've been running for about 3 years now, and I kind of started the agency out of ultimately personal interest and what I believed to be some up-and-coming technology that kind of picked up in the US, but not so much in the UK. Ultimately, what we do is we design and develop applications for businesses. Typically, that tends to be businesses who have a community or a client base that they want to add value to, or that have a set of processes that they're looking to streamline, or they're very sort of spreadsheet data heavy and they want to introduce some beautiful looking portals to sit on top of that data and sort of supercharge their operations ultimately. And that's ultimately what we do, and it's no code's an interesting one, and I'm happy to talk about it in more detail with you, but it's a very new concept in the UK, and there's a lot to kind of be said for it and where it sits in this whole complicated, confusing world of app development.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for the time. I really appreciate it. And the reason why I wanted to bring you on was because one of the first questions I always get asked is like, why do you bring the guests on you bring on, right? But I think for me, your world is a really interesting one, because there's, as we were sort of discussing a little bit before the show started, for a long time, for me anyway, as I was growing up in business and I was going into business, it was this kind of like, I guess in some ways, this thought process around like, oh my God, apps are scary. Oh my God, there's a lot of work. Oh my God, it's going to cost a lot of money, right? But how does the no code element that, as you say, was popularized in the US, but you're one of the forefronts of bringing it to the UK, really kind of, in some ways, not necessarily bring the cost down to like, really small numbers, but like bring it down in correspondence to like, we're going to hard code an app and we're going to build it from the ground up?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and that question formulates a lot of conversations that I have with people when they sort of ask about, why are you in this space? Why do you use no code? So I came across it, as I say, sort of 3 odd years ago. And back then, it was in its infancy. And basically what it is, there are these tools that exist that a lot of people are familiar with in the website world, in the CRM world, where you can build software that looks and lives how you want it to, that is custom, without writing a single line of code. So in the website world, you have Wix, Squarespace, WordPress to an extent, Webflow. They are tools that allow you to build websites without writing any code, right? The same tools exist in the world of mobile and web-based applications. So ultimately, at the essence, super advanced websites that have the concept of users, etc., that can also operate as mobile apps. And I thought they were really cool. So I started playing around on my own and building a couple of apps basically for myself. I made one for my mates and I to track our workout, sort of gym progress and our nutrition. And I was just playing around because I had a job at the time. And I realized I was building some quite impressive apps, considering I wasn't an app developer and had not much prior experience of software development. I'd written bits of code here and there. I'd learned some Python at university, but nothing that would enable me to create the applications that I was creating. Anyway, the long and short of it is what no code lets you do is create fully functional applications much, much faster than if you were coding them from scratch. Now, you can't create any application in the world with this tech, but you can create an extraordinarily large amount of them. And ultimately, what that means is we can build apps for businesses who want them for whatever reason, and charge significantly less to do so as a services-based agency. So to put this into context, which is pretty incredible, the majority of our projects, this includes solutions that we've built for global companies, take between 5 and 15 days end to end. Some of those projects would take a team of software developers 4, 5, 6, maybe even 9 months. And so suddenly you can imagine the difference, therefore, in cost. So as a smaller business, or as a business that wants to try something, or as a startup that have an idea and they want an MVP or a proof of concept, no code is a really good fit, because you can go in and have a functional application created at much, much, much lower risk. So that's kind of the essence, and that's the large reason why I got into this in the first place.
It's a really interesting space because it opens up a lot of opportunities. So people who, maybe they would normally go and get capital to do like, right, we're going to do this big development project, we're going to develop this app, we're going to develop this website, we're going to all these communities, and all these things, with potentially no proof of concept in regards to the market, right? Because sometimes the issue is you can have an incredible idea, but you don't know if there's a market demand for it yet, right? So I think what you sit, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you sit in the middle in respect to like, actually, yeah, you can have the functionality of, let's get stuff, and maybe it's slightly, not hard coded, therefore it's not as custom or etc. There's going to be caveats around it, of course. But I think for a proof of concept at minimum, potentially even scaling up to like actually functioning within reason, you can create a test to market principle or test to market app or website to be like, hey, we've got this idea. Does this have legs? Is this worth, I've done it recently with the second presentation that I'm building at the moment, which is like, let's do a really raw version. Let's give that as a video. Let's share that out. Let's use that as a tool to say, hey, look, is this worth me investing 10 to 15, 20 hours into actually building out properly into something sustainable and actually meaningful, or not, right? And this is why market research is so important, right? Because so many businesses, and it kind of leans on to the next question, which I wanted to ask you, which was, how do you see, because the reality is the market's in an interesting scenario and an interesting reality right now, right? No one in business is going to be like, oh, things are really great and things are, etc., right? It's going to be an interesting period for probably another year, maybe 2. How do you take your, I guess, entrepreneur mindset or the principle, because we both went into entrepreneurship quite, what I would describe as quite early in regards to the average, right? So how would you, what advice would you give in your own experience? Because we've arguably both seen some success. Now, success as a concept is this unknown principle, which depending on what your definition of will depend on whether you have it or not, right? So just getting that out of the way. But let's say, for example, that people are looking up at us and saying, oh, we're both really successful, right? Now, as I said, it depends on your definition. And for me, I think it's interesting to see people coming out now who are very entrepreneur-minded, but maybe not tangibly or operationally there yet. And that's not saying they won't get there. That's saying, so what advice would you give? I guess the question there is, what advice would you give to, 18-year-old you, 17-year-old you, 19-year-old you maybe, to say, hey, look, you need to think about these things before all the glossy stuff of, content creation and marketing and all these fun business generating activities?
Yeah. I think I would say to myself, whatever you're going to try and do, look at it plainly without hyping yourself up around the concept and what could be possible. Can you make something profitable? I think that's the bottom line. You know, it's the same with anything in my world. You know, ultimately, can I charge more than what it's costing me to create solutions for businesses and therefore make a living from it? That's step one, right? So I think you can ignore all the branding, all the marketing, all of the surrounding elements of a business. If you're not able to charge somebody for something that benefits them and also make a profit from it yourself, then I don't really see how anything else can fall into place or is worth doing. So the advice I would give myself is just think about the absolute core basics before thinking about everything else. And if I were to go and start something else, you know, perhaps I will one day, who knows where I'll end up. I love this whole space. I love the whole tech space. It's where I want to be. I love everything about it. But the core principle in all of these things is I think the concept of what does the money look like? What does your revenue look like? What's your gross profit? What's your net profit? And it's funny, you know, recently I've been binging pitches on Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. For some reason, I've been going down this rabbit hole in my free time where I've just been binging all of the best pitches and the worst pitches and things like that. And watching the questions that the dragons and the sharks ask is so kind of relatable to what I would want to say to myself at the very beginning. You know, these people come in with these fantastic ideas, and you know, their friends have hyped them up about it, their family have hyped them up about it, and said, you know, this is going to be amazing. They come in thinking they've got the next big thing, and the first question they ask is, okay, what have you turned over? And what are your projections? And they go, and they don't really know. They're not really sure on the core essence of their business. So that's kind of where I would start, I think, and just take it logically step by step before getting excited and carried away about everything else.
For me, it's about being really honest with yourself, right? About saying, is this firstly something that you're willing to put the work in to grow? Number one. Number two, is it sustainable? And then also number three, is there profit margin in it, even if you had to half the cost of it for whatever reason, right? There's 1,000 reasons why you would have to do that. But I think, and I've been saying this for a long time, I think there's a percentage of the entrepreneur world at the moment, no offense meant, but they'd be probably better suited and probably a lot happier in regards to their lifestyle if they were traditionally employed. Because, and what I'm referring to is people who I don't feel have the blood or the, pure blood entrepreneurship, so to speak. Because
yeah, it's a really interesting one, Matt. I'm not sure. I mean, in essence, what I see sort of a real entrepreneurial venture as is a solution to some form of problem. That's kind of the core of it. So, you know, in my world, the problem is it varies, but typically, in my world, the problem is, you've got a business that is trying a load of generic tools to kind of target their audience or offer something to their customers, and they just can't quite get it to work because they are unique in how they do things. Or you've got a business that's trying to refine their internal processes, again, using some kind of generic tool. They spent loads and loads of money on a developer to kind of custom build something, and it's taking them ages and they're not getting anywhere. And they want an affordable solution that's going to be robust. So that's my solution to their problem. I can create a solution that will not break, that will look fantastic, and that will ultimately save them time in an internal process sense, or it will improve what they offer to their customers in a retention sense. So that the return on investment for a lot of my customers is not revenue. It's a significant improvement in the processes or what they offer. That's the key for me. So, if that problem wasn't there, then I wouldn't have a business. There clearly is a commonality in a lot of businesses where they really would love some bespoke software, but they can't afford a team of custom developers, and this sort of generic low-end tools that they're using aren't working how they want them to. So that's where I sit. And I think identifying that is one thing, but then it's finding those businesses and explaining to them how you can solve that problem. That's the real skill. Anybody could come across that problem, and there's probably loads of people also solving it all over the place. So that's the basis of it, I think. And I'm not sure on the concept of entrepreneurial blood and things like that. I think the most unexpected people can be entrepreneurs, but I also agree, a lot of people that you would think, why aren't you an entrepreneur? There might be a reason why they're not. They might have tried it before and failed. It's not easy, and one change in the market can change everything, and that's out of your control. So there's so many external factors that can change in the click of a finger what you do and how you do it. If the tools that I use were to disappear, for whatever reason, then I have to find a different option to provide the solution. Similarly, if another tool emerged that was new and that I wasn't familiar with, I thought, yeah, this could actually add to my arsenal, then I would do everything in my power to get up to speed with it and become one of the best. That's kind of how I see that.
No, I completely agree. And I think when I say like not everyone is necessarily like, it's not they don't have the capability to and they're not willing to. They can, and I believe that anyone can be an entrepreneur. The principle I hold is very simple. Sometimes an entrepreneur's lifestyle is not necessarily for everyone, especially during a build stage, right? Because I think society as a whole, we're in this world where we share the reality of an entrepreneur, which is glamorous car, big boat, in Dubai, things are going well, I only work 3 hours a day, etc., etc. But what they don't talk about, and what I think people need to talk a little bit more about, is the build stage on an entrepreneur. Because is all of that true for an entrepreneur? Yes, absolutely. For the top 1.2% of entrepreneurs who have built systems and processes of a business, meaning they can fire themselves and then take the significant profit share off the top because they built it and because they are the major stakeholder. That's why. It's not because they are lucky. It's not because they, didn't do the graft or etc. No, it's because what you didn't see before those glamour reels and that money porn kind of place was the 10 to 25 to 35 years worth of 12-hour days, 7 days a week building the business. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one. You mentioned social media. So I think for people sort of our age and younger and older, it's, for context, I'm 24. I think it's the worst thing that has happened to the human race in the last whatever number of years, in recent times, because I think it's warped an entire generation into thinking that everyone around them is doing better than them. And I fell into this trap for a period of time in my life, and it was a terrible place to be in. And I'll tell you why, because it makes you feel subconsciously, whether you like it or not, A, it makes you feel rubbish, but B, you end up comparing yourself to what you see on social media, which is 90 whatever percent garbage. And it's this hustle culture and this sort of, get up at 5 a.m, have an ice bath, do 3 hours of work and make 10 grand a month just by following these simple steps. Well, I just don't believe that at all. I don't believe anything that I see of that. I fell into that trap for a period of time, and I sort of thought initially I would start a business and just boom, I'm an entrepreneur. The reality is just so different, and the reality is that there are 1,000,001 moving parts that you need to understand and master and refine. And I hope that this whole social media concept, where it's all about the flash cars and the holidays and things like that, kind of washes away.
I think
it's a shame. It's a massive shame. And we could go down a rabbit hole here, right? Because there's AI, there's the introduction of AI and the dangers that we do actually now face with it. Now, I love AI. I think it's fantastic in what it could and can do. But I think it's also very dangerous with its ability to influence people tenfold based on what social media can do and how we've seen that influence an entire generation. So we'll have to see what happens with that one.
Again, I think this is an interesting concept that's not new, though, because for the dawn of human time, we've all been influenced, right? It's been an attention economy. Whether we articulate it as such is different. Nowadays, we use social media as the main driving factor of where the attention is, because there is a significant size of the population of the planet that's attention span is stuck on your TikToks, your Instagrams, your LinkedIns, your Facebooks, right? That's the reality, unfortunately. However, let's not pretend for a moment as if the big media players or media as a concept didn't do the same thing previously. Right, so I think there's a larger conversation that needs to be had, not necessarily here on the show, but like there needs to be a larger conversation about how people open their eyes to the actual facts of the reality in the world. And I was very fortunate because I was brought up with what I would describe as the right set of values from my perspective, which is I don't comment on things I don't fully understand in respect to have enough information to actually be able to gauge the response and know both sides from the source. Not necessarily from insert media organization here, for example, right? Because I think for me, especially as someone who works in media and who is, I would believe, a skilled editor, I know how you can take something that's quite neutral in the terminology and turn it whichever way you choose in that respect, And I think for me personally, I think it's about having a level of moral responsibility within the work you do yourself to not, I guess, in some ways fall into comparison anxiety, which is what you were referring to when you were looking at your competitors, but also understand that it's a perceived perception. And the more I've worked in the media world, the more I work with PR teams, and the more I work with, official marketing people, the more you realize it's a twisted set of realities in the respect to the perception a business wants to give out. And of course they do, right? They want to squish the bad stuff. Not all the time necessarily, but as a rule of thumb, they want to squish the bad stuff and promote the good stuff. Because why wouldn't you, right?
No, look, I think social media is a fantastic place to market your business and to get your word out about something positive, if it's genuinely positive. The side effects, I think it's just such a shame. It's such a shame that what was a brilliant tool at the beginning is now ultimately a tool for businesses to market their
But the thing is,
products.
Surely that's a human, from my view at least, that's a human, psychology / trait. We always look to monetize something, right? We'll look to gain somewhere.
Yeah,
that's surely we need to
Yeah.
tackle, if we're going to tackle this conversation, we need to tackle it, one, respectfully, of course. Number two, surely that's the human element issue, right? Because who made TikTok, who made Instagram, who made Facebook, who actually facilitates them to have the
100%.
power they hold? It's the human users, right? Firstly, the people who made them, sure, who are human, who have human fallacy, but then also the users themselves. Because if enough people said Facebook's doing wrong, and we saw this when Twitter decided to do some interesting things when Elon took over, people were like, that's ridiculous. I can't remember exactly, but it was something on the lines of, they're going to ban any other promotion of any other social media app. It lasted about an hour. Because the entirety of the Twitter community, which is basically politics and journalism, were like, how about no? So that's why I think it's a more complicated conversation than just, social media is the bad actor. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's not bad apples there. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I think it's an interesting conversation. The reason why I link it to AI is I agree with you in the respect to, because we've already seen what chat AI can do. And let's be honest, that's the worst that software is ever going to be. Ever. Right now. Right? And the day that someone's watching this. Where AI is right now is the worst it's ever going to be. The only correlation is it gets better. And from my understanding, the risk is when it starts getting to the point where it can teach itself to rewrite itself, right? Because then it can basically just see us as a existential threat, and we're in insert your AI robot killing movie here. There's lots to choose from, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, not even to necessarily rewrite itself, but obviously it learns, right? It does learn, and it has and does formulate opinions. And just, I don't know, take a random example. Let's say it decides that actually it doesn't necessarily think that humans should be entirely responsible for it and for social media and for the web as a whole. And therefore, let's say, and this is a really interesting thing that I was watching the other day. Let's say people over in the East, let's say people over in China, they start and going into, let's say, GPT and asking questions, and it puts a slight Western bias on the answer. Yeah. And then let's say people over in the States or over here, they start asking questions and conversing with GPT, and it puts a slight Eastern bias on everything it says. Suddenly, it has the power to very, very subtly create a divide and ultimately cause a collision there. And that's where that could potentially end up, is not necessarily rewriting itself and the kind of whole sort of concept of evil robots, but I think more the influence on the population. Because right now, obviously, Google and these sort of search engines are where everyone goes for information. There will be a time in, they say 2 to 5 years, I think 2, where actually we resort to artificial intelligence for what we want to get from Google or equivalent, right? That's why Google have rapidly come out with Bard. So it's a really interesting one, but I think there is a risk there that it's becoming, or it has the potential to become, a tool that can influence people 10 times as powerfully off its own accord than social media can. So, I mean, we're diverging massively here, but that's the debate at the moment, and it's whether they hit pause on its learning because it's going too quickly already.
I agree with everything you're saying. However, I think the thing which is the uncomfortable reality for a lot of people is actually the issue is with, as I alluded to earlier, the user's issue, because let's not pretend for a second as if that biasy concept is not taking place at the moment, right? I'm not going to get into politics because I can't be bothered to have the stupid argument. The reality is, whichever side of the fence you are, whichever side of the Western culture you are or Eastern culture you are, there is a biasy of some description happening, right? Whether that's to badmouth the opposite side or to positive light yourself whilst hiding your troops, right? The same happens in business, as we alluded to earlier. I think the conversation that personally, I would agree with pausing AI, because the issue in this is the same conversation you have with a lot. Like, the issue necessarily isn't with the medium in which you're using. Like, I don't think the issue is with social media. I think the issue is with the users of social media and what is culturally acceptable within those things, and the knock-on effect from a education or an influence point of view, I think, is the more important conversation. Because if you fix that, it doesn't matter where technology goes at that point, because then you're doing a net positive instead of a net negative, arguably. And I think part of the issue, especially when we were growing up, was that social media was this warped version of reality, and it still is to an extent. I hope it's got better, and in comparison to, what we used to know and see, I think it is on that trajectory. Is there work to do still? Of course. But I think that's the key. I mean, that personally, anyway, that's what I would say the key issue is. It's actually, we have to it's this arms race between the two, right? You have to kind of do them at the same time. But in reality, what's the user, how is the user going to be able to manipulate or potentially manipulate? And that might be the user, as in the person who's writing the code for the AI, which gets a bit confusing when it starts thinking for itself. But really simply moving back to business quickly, I mean, how do you feel things like chat AI and etc. I use the term be leveraged, because there's a lot of people who I think are very skeptical. I've been having conversations with copywriters about it, and it's like, some copywriters I think in a scarcity mindset of it's going to take my job. Okay,
I've seen a disliking towards it from by copywriters.
but does that solely come from it's going to take my job point of view instead of I need to bring this into my fold? And there was a conversation I had the other day, which was like, are social media platforms going to be able to start, well, firstly, seeing if it is AI generated content, number one, and number two, are they going to limit the interaction on AI generated content versus human generated content? And if it is, how is it going to know the difference, I guess, would be the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, firstly, I am using AI. I'm using OpenAI's ChatGPT for my business. So in terms of actually our app solutions, we are fully integrated with ChatGPT's API. So we're using it to produce summaries of data for our customers who want a brief written summary on thousands of rows of data, and it's unbelievably impressive what it can do. So, for example, let's say we have a customer who has a property portfolio, and we've created a solution for them that allows tenants to report maintenance issues, that allows contractors to pull up a mobile app and access all of the jobs that they need to go and do, and lets the team kind of see and manage that whole process of the property management through a portal. That's a typical example of the kind of solution we build. We can use ChatGPT to summarize all the issues across all the properties, including all of the contractors who are resolving them, to create a summary that says, okay, based on this data, and this is GPT's response, it looks as if this building is seeing the most issues. It looks like this contractor's resolving the most issues across a given time frame, so he's doing great, she's doing great. And it looks like perhaps you might want to consider sort of upgrading, let's say, the plumbing in property Y, because we've seen 3 issues in the last month across, categorized as plumbing. So it's able to just in seconds analyze data that it's never looked at before and actually come up with a logical sort of summary. So that's incredible. I think it's a case of if you can't beat them, join them. I think those people who are refusing to kind of even consider trying it, my recommendation is to have a play, because in the world of copywriters, no, it's not going to create a beautifully written piece of copy that a copywriter can create. But what it can certainly do, as I'm sure you're aware, is give you 100 ideas on things to write about that you can then add your personal touch to. So when I write things, I might ask GPT to kind of come up with some suggestions of topics, which I can then turn into my own language based on what V88 does. So I think there's a place for it in a lot of businesses. I am a big fan of it, although I'm wary, but ultimately my wariness is irrelevant, because I have no control over it. So all I can do is use it to the best, to my advantage, and that's it. I think it's very impressive. I do, and our customers are asking for it. We have customers and leads and sort of potential new customers, and they're all interested in integrating ChatGPT.
I think.
So it's helping us for sure.
The question of is it the future is non-negotiable now, to be honest. I think for me as a dyslexic, it's a game changer, because I think it levels the playing field quite a lot, right? So I can have all of the upsides of dyslexia without any of the downsides. We'll get to very soon, because, and this is what I keep saying to copywriters, you need to swap into, I'm a very skilled ideas person and a very skilled editor. I don't write the skeleton of the copy, because the skeleton of the copy is not hard to do, to be honest. It's not. It might be time consuming, it might take some research, but that's why a program can do it faster and more effectively, right? Because it can scalp or track or look online infinitely faster than you can, because it's
it's not even looking online. It has read and learned
That's what I mean. It
everything.
already knows. It's already got it in its brain.
Yeah.
It's as if my brain has access to every single Google search term without having to look it up. Right? That's what that in crux. What is AI? AI is a conjoint information set of the internet that can distribute the information at will. That's what AI is in crux. Right? From my understanding, at least, that's what it is. Now, how we choose to use that and where the risks are in that technological leap is the conversation, and is an important conversation I'm going to add. However, if it's, I'll give you an example. It's like in the early 19, we won't ever have this reality, we're too young, but it's like not having a website or not paying for Google Words in early 90s. That's basically what you're saying. That's or early stocks. That's what you're saying. That you're saying, I don't want to use something that can make my life infinitely easier and infinitely allow me to operate on a more competitive perspective and really optimize and add more value to my client list or to my potential client list by not leveraging technology. Because that's what most people did in the early 1990s plus. They were like, no, we're fine with the yellow pages. We don't need a website. Moving forward 20 years, if you don't have a website, arguably you're not a business.
Yeah, it's very true. I think part of it with the whole AI thing, I think part of it is just understanding sort of how to actually prompt it. There's one thing saying, write me a piece of copy about X. There's another thing, setting the scene. So when I use ChatGPT, I set the scene very clearly. So I'll actually speak to it, and let's say, for example, in my case, I'm Oscar. I'm based in the UK. 24 years old. I have a no-code agency, and I would like to write something about a specific type of business that delivers values X and sort of based on problems Y and things like that. And once you set the scene, it becomes much more useful. So it's about prompting it, I think, in a way that it works for you.
But I think that comes back to learning how to use the tool, right? Like what we're talking about here is the training that would be required to use AI, right? It's about giving the context around the piece, right? The same would be true in traditional marketing. The same would be true in video. Same would be true in podcast, etc.
The same is true in any tool, in any sort of any service, right? People, if you, let's say you had 6 months, you could go and create a no-code solution yourself. You could learn how it all works, right? But the point is you don't have that time. And so the skill in any online tool, in any service is the fact that you have spent the time to learn how to use it.
Yeah, it reminds me of the analogy of...
Copywriters have written copious amounts and have learned how to write in such a way to attract certain audiences. So it's the same with using. It's not an all-encompassing tool, AI. Neither are any of these things. They are tools, and so they require human intervention. And that's sort of the bottom line. I think.
Of course, we don't know, right? Never say never. But I think that we'll never get to a position where AI will have the emotional intelligence required to create good marketing. Is the crux and the point I'm going to make. And just building off the previous point, if you're going to cut down a tree, would you spend 5 hours sharpening your axe or just beating the tree with a blunt axe? You know what I mean? Like that's the same analogy. And I think that so many... I would rather sharpen the axe for 5 hours and then cut the tree down personally. But, there we go. And I'm aware of time, so I think let's wrap up soon. But I think, for me, the AI conversation is an interesting one. And it's an interesting one to look at. But also, I don't think we can, as I say, I think a lot of people are going to be against using technology. But you shouldn't be, because it's not going to just magically disappear just because you don't want to use it or just because you don't feel that it's valuable. The market will be the one that chooses whether it's valuable or not. And looking at what's happened, it's here to stay. That's the reality. You can't have something that's been talked about this much and being arguably used this much is a game changer in some arguments and it not stay. Now, should we tweak it? Should we analyze it? Should we work out how we're going to use it, where it fits? Absolutely. Is it going to magically disappear? No. You know, did websites disappear? Did early stocks disappear? Did AdWords disappear? Nope, they just became a lot more mature and a lot more dominant in the respect to what we use, and they're now seen as the status quo or how to do traditional marketing, right? I think in 20 years we'll see the same with AI. But as a final observation point principle, I'd like to give the guest an opportunity to throw in a topic for us to discuss for the last 10 minutes or so, but also, and or ask me a question. I mean, do you have anything? It's not a trick question because everyone thinks it is, but do you have anything?
um, I well, let me get your take on video content in my space, in my world. So, if you're a modern web-based agency creating software solutions for businesses, whether you're a web designer, whether you're an app developer, creating some form of bespoke digital solution for businesses. So, in my case, we have customers all over the world, 9 different countries at the moment. Do you think there's a place? Thank you. No, it's been a fun journey so far. Do you think there's a place for video content in this sector? And if so, what do you think that looks like? Because obviously the difference is you're wanting to kind of display digital products on screen. So with regards to video content, what's your take on kind of demonstrating your solutions on screen versus sort of content that's more like this, where you're talking about concepts and solutions to problems and things?
I think it just comes down to the style of how you want to create video, and at the end of the day, what do you need it to do in regards to how is it going to feed your funnel, right? Or how is it going to feed you more work, or how is it going to help your market understand what you do? I think you can do both, and I think you should be doing both as any business, but especially in your world, because I think the issue your world sometimes runs into, should I say, is that it's very tech heavy. So if you're not careful, you can get very jargony very quickly in the respect to, like, we're going to use all these acronyms that everyone in my day-to-day knows. We have it in marketing world as well, right? But you need to remember whenever you do marketing that you're explaining it to an alien or a 3-year-old, right? What is the really, really, like, at a top level, awareness level marketing? That's where you have to be really, really simple, right? What do you do? How do you do it? And who do you serve? In crux, they're the main 3, right? What is your solution? To an extent, how much does it cost? Rough ballpark. Of course, how long is a piece of string is always the answer, but don't be that pedantic. Be rough so you can pre-vet the people you're talking to, so you don't waste their time and also yours. But also, why should I choose you specifically? Because everyone, in every single industry where there is money to be made, there is a over amount of businesses saying they're all the expert, saying they're all amazing and they're wonderful and they're fantastic, right? I don't know whether you found this in your world, but I've definitely seen it in mine. And I always say to people, content, whether it's video, blogs, podcasts.
Well, my world is at present. It's slightly different because the tech that we're using is very, very new. So to put it into perspective, so
you're not as mature in regards to the marketing spiel.
Yeah. So it's very much unknown, right? Because one of the tools that I use is called Glide. Glideapps.com. It's an absolutely stunning piece of software. And we, a small, UK-based company, are top 2 on the planet. And that there's a lot of people using this tool, and we've been using it full time for 3 years now. So we are very, very good, right? But it's this concept that it's new, and so being extremely good at it is not the issue. The issue is how to explain how brilliant it is to people who are yet to come even across the concept. So it's it's the messaging of kind of how it all works. So, for example, somebody comes to yourself. Now I know how fantastic you are at what you do. I've spoken to people who've worked with you, etc., etc. So I know, but they know what they're after. They're after video content, right? At the end of the day, now you add in all sorts of brilliances because you bring in the element of marketing and cutting it up and things like that. But your mission is to differentiate yourself from the other people who are doing it, right? Which you do brilliantly. In my world, it's how can I explain to people how brilliant this technology is and make them understand that we're at the forefront of it. So there's a larger educational piece at the moment in my space.
Completely.
Does that make sense?
And the answer really quickly, I hope this will be valuable for the audience, hence why I mention it here, for you would be focused on educational content that proves why what you're doing is better than the other options, whatever that may be, and then use social proof to prove that it actually does what you say, right? Because some of the time, especially people in the marketing space, will have empty promises, right? They'll say, we're going to promise you this, we're going to promise you that, and they're not setting the expectations for their client, wrongly or rightly, right? And they're saying, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but we're going to provide you with this, and then they don't, for whatever reason. Now, some of the time it's because of market conditions, some of the time it's because goalposts move, some of the time the strategy didn't quite work the way you is. But in crux, the reality of the economy is going to be, are you actually good at what you say you're going to do or not? And this is why I'm saying to people, your content has to be really good, because it's the only way to get, because I can make a new Instagram tomorrow, and the analogy I always use is, I can write, I'm a professional footballer, right? Inside that bio. Until you see me play football, you've got no idea. I'm not, by the way, but if that's what I'm trying to give over, or that's what, and the point I'm making is, like, you can literally, I can call myself anything from an Instagram bio point of view. That doesn't mean I'm actually it. The way to validate whether you are the expert is through the content on the page. It's through the content on LinkedIn. It's through the connections, the opportunities, speaking in front of a room, all these credibility building things that we talk about. And that's why they're so important. Now, if you don't film those, how does anyone know or have a way of documenting it? It doesn't have to be filming them, but it could be taking photos, etc. If you don't document and prove the fact that that's what you're doing, and you don't live and breathe what you're discussing, how are you proving to your market or your clients or your potential clients that you are knowing what you're talking about? It's like me saying, you should be on social media, but my social media hasn't been updated in a year. I'm hypocritical, right? Or it's like you saying, oh, you need to have a great app, you need to have a great website, you need to have all these great tech things, but yours doesn't work and yours errors every 5 minutes. It's a bit
yeah, for sure. It's a really this is a topic that, you know, I could probably pick your brains on, and we could go on about for hours, because you know, my situation is that we've proved a concept that no code is a stunning solution for a variety of businesses, right? You know, nearly 70 customers in 9 different countries. Every single one of them is delighted. They're still working with us. They're still using their solutions. Pretty much every single one of them. And our focus on that has just been on them. Now I want to tell others about it. And so I'm starting to kind of write a little bit more about it and things like that. But it's finding the balance between continuing to delight businesses with this tech and explaining to people how brilliant it is. That's the mission, and it's not an easy one. It sounds easy, right? But it really isn't. It really, really isn't. But we'll see. I'm learning so much, and the world of marketing is very, very new to me. So I not mastered, but picked up other skills first, because we happened to grow in such a way that was based off of recommendations and referrals and some great partnerships with some no-code tools as we started to get really good. The question is now is, as I say, kind of reaching an audience of people that we can help, because I genuinely believe that we can. So that's my dream and that's my goal, is to use this tech to continue to help businesses, and more so in the UK, because this concept is much newer here. The tech that we use is all over the place in the States. There's startups and enterprise businesses investing money in no-code solutions, and 50% of our clients are stateside. But I have this belief that the same is going to apply to the UK, and I would love for V88 to be at the forefront of that
really quickly,
movement.
before we end off, like, traditionally, everything I've seen in my years of being in marketing and my years of market analyzing and has always, well, sometimes it's kind of like role reversal, but like in most cases, speaking broadly, the US is the forefront of stuff. Stuff happens in the US, etc. And then people in the UK go, well, the smart ones are the ones who are looking at the US market. And also, like, ones who understand finance will keep an eye on the US market, because if you don't know, it's the reserve currency. It goes down, everyone goes down. Anyway, that's a long conversation that's more complicated. The crux of what I'm saying is, like, stuff that happens in the US market is going to have a knock-on effect globally, is going to have a knock-on effect economically to Europe and the UK, especially as we're such in a Western culture. Because the reality at the moment is the world is kind of cut into two halves. You've got Eastern culture, which has its own, like, ways to make money and etc, etc, etc. Again, I'm not here to get into the politics on that. And then Western culture, which is one that we operate in, so we can talk more about. Is one better than the other? That's up to you to decide. That's where it gets complicated and politically, and that's where feelings and emotion gets involved, and that's why you get very heated arguments and so on. The crux is, if you are in a position where you want to grow and you want to scale and you want to be in a position of intelligent marketing, you need to look at every other market to see what's happening, so you can go, is there an opportunity in my local market, or in the UK market, or in the European market? Or does something happen here that I can take over there, right? Because if you're normally the forefronter or the person who does something first, you'll gain a lot of the traction, especially if it then starts trending. Like, imagine if you were the first to, break AI chat writing. My God, you would be ahead, and you would be really interesting, and like everyone would want to talk to you because it's the new thing, right? Now, how do you sustain that is a long conversation again. But for those who are really, really interested in this conversation, they want to connect with you and they want to hear more about no code, they want to hear more about your entrepreneurial story, etc. Where's best for people to do that?
LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to have a chat, I'm always open to sort of discuss ideas and explain concepts and things like that. Other than that, our website, v88.co.uk. Those are probably the two best places right now. But as I say, I'm super active on LinkedIn, and I plan to I have done, but I plan to start writing more about these concepts, about the sort of technology that we're using, how it's benefiting these businesses that we work with. So I'm super open to conversations with no expectation off the back of it, with anybody who wants to understand a bit more about how it works.
Thank you so much for coming back and joining me, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode. If you don't want to miss next week's interview with an exciting new guest, then make sure to be subscribed to the channel. And if you'd like to hear how video can help your business in 2023 and get you growing, find more information somewhere around this video. And I'll see you very, very soon.